Well, we've got one of our flagship bumper-to-bumper shops, which is in Tempe. He's my next-door neighbor, and a good friend of mine is Joel from Arizona Imports. They specialize in Nissan, and they do a lot of BMW, Toyota. Really, they're good at anything. But we've got Joel. It's his second time back, so it's good to have you on the show, Joel. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. Glad to see you guys again, and glad to be here.
Joel, when you but Arizona Imports is an evolution of not just imports, but you're also folded, was it Bill's Beamers, a BMW specialist, into one. So
yeah, we're doing a lot of BMW work because it was a Bill's Beamers was a BMW shop only, and we took that over about 6-7 years ago. And we've done Asian cars forever, and we do domestic, so we're pretty bumper to bumper on everything nowadays.
I like that, bumper to bumper. But you're strong in everything, but really strong in imports and
that's been our specialty for years.
Right. Okay. Good.
Well, we got together for breakfast this morning. We said, hey, what are we going to talk about this morning? Last week was air condition, and like you said, keeping you cool. This week, Joel said, man, cooling system is the theme, and I've seen so many people go get a radiator fix but really neglect the rest of the system. So if you're replacing a radiator, so many of these components are plastic anymore. We got plastic thermostats, we got plastic water pump impellers, and if you're doing a major repair such as a radiator on your vehicle, hey, is there other things we should think about? Because any more of these cars overheat, if they overheat for very long, it wrecks the engine or blows the head gasket. It takes a small repair. As Aaron was saying, you got steam pouring out of the front of the car. That's not a good situation. And, just because the gauge doesn't read hot on your dashboard doesn't mean the car isn't really burning hot. I mean, you don't want to, when it's overheating,
you're having a problem,
you don't want to keep driving it. And one of the ways you might know is some people say, all of a sudden, my air conditioner is blowing warm, like we talked about last week, but all of a sudden my car is overheating. So the two almost go hand in hand sometimes.
Well, not almost. I mean, they do. And what's funny is we always get we talked about it last week. We always have the confusion where people say, my air conditioning is not working right. I need some coolant. Well, it's two totally different things, but the two work hand in hand. You're not going to have good air conditioning if the cooling system of the car, the radiator parts, are not working well. And if that's not working well, again, you're not going to have good air conditioning, vice versa. There's so many components that go hand in hand, like the fans, the control systems. It's all...
Well, and the radiator and the condenser are right next to each other, and they're both exchanging heat from the outside air, and if one gets hot, the other one's going to get hot too.
But you say plastic. Now, people are thinking, why in the heck are they putting plastic parts in my car? What's going on here? Why, Joel, why are they using plastic? I mean...
It doesn't corrode.
It just breaks.
It breaks over time, but it seems to last a lot longer than the old brass radiators did. It dissipates heat better. The whole system is better nowadays, but you have to take care of everything, and everything needs maintenance.
Well, but specifically the plastic, I mean, they're doing it to save weight. It all going back to the fuel economy. So you have now instead of an old copper radiator that weighs 40 pounds, you've got an aluminum core with plastic tanks, and it weighs 6 pounds maybe.
Yeah, you'll see on the Hondas, some of those radiators are minute. The whole thing weighs 2 pounds. And
yeah, you put it in your back pocket almost.
Well, you do a lot of BMW work, and you mentioned that a lot of BMWs that overheat, if they overheat for very long, the engine is done or the head gasket is done or whatever, a major repair. So you're doing a radiator on a BMW, and you've got a thermostat housing that's plastic? Is that the way it is?
Yeah, and most cars nowadays, when you have a plastic or composite, as they call it, radiator, thermostat, hoses, and hose connections all made out of a composite plastic. Car's got 100,000 miles or close to it, 10 years old. We'd normally recommend to replace it all, considering if it was original, and if it fails and a $60 hose costs you a $7,000 engine, just do the math. It makes sense.
Yeah, it's a little bit of preventive maintenance can go a long way.
Well, and all that stuff you're almost touching anyway, or you're right there. There's going to be labor savings, and rather than fix a radiator today and then the next halfway through the summer you have something else, such as a heater hose blow loose or something like that, you should have done it all at the same time. One trip to the shop, more of a holistic repair.
Now, Joel, when you're doing, I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask you anyway because not everybody else does. We're not replacing a plastic tank radiator with a copper one. There's some options in maybe the late 90s where you might go with a copper one. But now let's say your water pump on your classic problem on a BMW, Volkswagen, you see them all the time, instant overheating. What's happening is that plastic impeller.
The impeller has gone bad and it doesn't circulate the coolant. A lot of times we'll update it to put the metal impeller back in on the newer water pumps.
And that's where I was going. So we're not necessarily going to put the old plastic impeller back on. And what's funny, these manufacturers, they do all this stuff like the Porsche Cayenne. What's the SUV, the Porsche? I'm having a little moment
very
here.
Very similar to a Volkswagen.
Well, yeah, like the Touareg, but they have all these plastic cooling system parts, and they fail. But they've designed all this stuff to save the weight, get the CAFE ratings down for their fuel mileage. But then, what do you know? All the replacement parts are all metal. So
well, you
it's
say
like they planned it.
You
almost,
say the plastic is for saving weight, but I look at that impeller and I say, man, how much are you saving with a metal impeller versus a plastic? It's insignificant when you look at the weight of the vehicle.
Yeah,
I mean,
but you stack it all up, and it's 5 pounds at the end of the day. Or
little
10
here, little
pounds.
there. Some engineering mind thought, this is better, but I mean, it is hokey. And composite is a special word, fancy word for plastic.
It's like when my hair left, just a little bit at a time, but you add it all up, and now I'm bald. So same deal.
Well, and back to the conversation, our listeners really can get something from this, is that I have people, they would call and their car's overheating, and they say, I'm watching the gauge, it's not super hot, I'm going to try and nurse it down to your shop. And that is a big, big, big no-no. Pull over, call a tow truck. Get it towed in, because you're going to do a whole lot more damage. And that was to Joel's point this morning when we were talking at breakfast, is that, you're going to save $100 on a tow, but you're going to cost yourself an extra $1,500 or $2,000 or $5,000 for a $100 tow.
Yeah, we deal with that all the time, where people call up, hey, I'm going to nurse it in, the gauge is getting hot, I'm just going to turn it off, I'm going to put my heater on. We tell them right away, tow that car in, $100, $125 tow bill, much less than the alternative of an engine job.
Well, yeah, and most people have, they don't even know. I call them, do you have any type of towing assistance or help? I don't know. Call your insurance company. The very best roadside service that you're ever going to get is from your insurance company. I mean, I probably have 3 different versions of roadside service, and I don't know it. Probably on my American Express card. My car insurance, it's $2 or $3 a month.
Insignificant. By that, it's cheaper than maybe the big name that you got to call, and you got to wait through their towing line to get a tow truck. Yeah, you can call whoever you want.
And then they send the vultures out, and that's a whole nother topic. We won't go there today, but there's some of that happening. So.
Well, for sure. If I can give our listeners a couple takeaways on our cooling system, just to really boil it down, if you're doing a major repair to your cooling system, such as a radiator, go ahead and see what other components in that system, because they're all the same age, and think about doing a whole system kind of redo. And then the other thing is, if your car's overheating, just pull over, get off the side of the road, tow it in. It's going to save you a lot of money. So,
yeah, don't make a $500 repair a new car or some other kind of problem. All right, lots of phones lit up here, and looks like we're going to go with Pete in Queen Creek on his 2004 Nissan Maxima. And Pete, lucky for you, Joel is the master Nissan technician.
He is.
It's in the blood. So, Pete, what can we help you with today?
That's good to hear. My car's been MIA for 2 weeks at the dealer, and it kind of concerns me they haven't been able to come up with a resolution. Basically, it slams into gear and drive and reverse. And when it does, you take off and it's like in high gear. They don't know what's going on. There's a check engine light. The checker had said there was a code, something about U1000.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know what that is. I could never find much information about it. But I'm kind of stuck on it. I'd like to get my car back.
Dave's over here chomping at the bit.
I'm chomping at the bit, because Joel and I particularly worked on a vehicle just like this a couple years ago.
I remember that car well.
We actually got in a fight between the two of us because we weren't fixing it. And I'm going to fight his friends.
I'm fine with the dealer right now. I want it back.
So what a U1000 code is that's going to be a loss of communication between modules somewhere in the vehicle. So more than likely what you're having is the computer is not seeing the right signals from the TCM or transmission control module.
So the engine control computer is not talking to the transmission computer.
Correct. And so when this vehicle came to us, this was a couple years ago, same type of thing. He had been to the dealer. They said, you need a new transmission. So he took it to a shop, and they installed the transmission and used one for him. He had exactly the same problem because no one really diagnosed it. So then it came to us, and we looked at it, and you know what? We did the best we could, and we replaced the transmission control module, and that wasn't the right recommendation either. So when we were ready to throw in the towel, we said, we better go to the Nissan experts. So we took the car over to Joel at Arizona Imports, and Joel couldn't sleep till he figured it out.
I remember that car, and it was Dave kind of challenged me with that car, and I stayed there myself to work on it. And it turned out, if I remember that one right, it turned out to be a relay.
It was a bad relay, and we had put the test light on the power wire to the TCM, but a test light's great. It'll light up whether it's 9 volts or whether it's 12 volts. And that was our mistake, and Joel, looked at it, scratched his head, came back the next day with the answer. And if I know Joel very well, he was thinking about it at 3 o'clock in the morning.
That's right. I remember that. And I remember driving it to your shop all apart to show you we found it. And
well, so Pete, it's a control problem. You don't necessarily have a transmission problem per se. It's the computers are not properly communicating with each other or the transmission. So it's probably like in a default mode, Dave, like
it's
a limp.
It's in a fail-safe mode, and the reason it slams into gear when that happens is you just open up the EPC, or electronic pressure control solenoid, in the transmission. So it's full-line pressure. It's going to shift hard as a rock, and it's going to be stuck in 3rd or 4th gear, and it's going to take off real slow.
And that U1000 code on a Nissan is a very generic code. It can come on a lot of different modules. It's a communication problem, like David said.
And Pete, Joel is Tempe 202 in McClintock, just south there, and I imagine you might be at a dealer on the east side based on the fact that you're in Queen Creek. So if you don't get some satisfaction, maybe it's time to pull it out. And Joel has been sleeping very well lately, so he's up for the challenge. So good question. Thanks for calling. And we're going to go now with Andy in Phoenix on his 1996 Volvo. Andy, what can we help you with?
Yeah, good morning. I bought this Volvo about 3 months ago, and it's just, and problem is when you're going 40 miles an hour, the AC is working, blowing cold. But it's when you're stopping and idling or just going under 40 miles an hour, it's not blowing cold at all. So what would your recommendation be for me to figure out what's wrong, why it's not blowing when you're not going, 40 miles an hour?
Well, let me ask you a question. So we're at the service counter, and this is how it's going to go. So your air conditioning is not working well. But tell me about the engine. Is the temperature gauge hot? Does the engine seem to be running hotter than normal?
No, it's running. I just bought this car 3 months ago.
Okay.
It was used,
Uh-huh.
and everything it's good. It's not, it's not overheating, and it's just the AC, and it's it has plain coolant in it, and and everything, water in the radiator and all that.
Okay.
So
Well, the first thing we're going to want to start with on any air conditioning system is make sure you have a full charge, a proper charge of refrigerant. On the 96, it's going to be R134, FR134. But it's an airflow issue more than likely.
Someone needs to put pressure gauges on there, see what kind of numbers you got. Usually if you got cold air on the freeway, the compressors, which is a pump, is spinning much faster than slower. And I would start, just like Matt said, with gauges and refrigerant levels.
Yeah, and it's a classic example. You're going down the freeway, 45, 50, 60 miles an hour, or in city traffic. As long as you're moving, there's air flowing across the radiator. And when you stop, what happens? There's no airflow. So the system has fans. There's fans, electronic fans that are controlled by the computers. When the AC comes on, you need to turn those fans on to run air over the radiator.
Well, we were talking at breakfast, and you had a situation where you had a car in your shop, and same type of deal. And what you ended up doing, Joel, was kind of creating a gap between the condenser and the radiator and just washing out all the crud that had gotten in there that was restricting airflow. So that's a repair someone could do in their driveway.
Well, yeah, very simple. And a lot of cars you see, they put a bra on the car. Or, remember the older Camaros, they had this little scoop that everybody rips off on the parking curbs or bottom out, and that's there to direct some air up on the radiator. So you've got to make sure all the trim panels, all the duct work is there. Make sure the fan shroud is intact.
What kind of car was that, Joel, that you had that issue with in your shop?
That was a Volkswagen the other day.
A Volkswagen. So there was
that's common on a lot of cars.
Just crud between the condenser and the radiator, and that was restricting the airflow. So.
And we see that too, like especially the cars that do not have electric fans. A mechanical fan, as soon as you start the engine, the fan is spinning. So we see with the people where they have the dog or the cat in the garage or whatever, and in the condenser, the radiator is just packed with dog hair or fine carpet. I had a customer one time with carpet in their garage, so it would just suck all that stuff up.
We've got Sean.
A very patient Sean from Mesa. Sean, what can we help you with today?
Hey, I just wanted to offer a cautionary tale to guys out there with these plastic radiators and cooling systems. I suffered and incurred third-degree burns to Mr. Johnson and the twins in the torso as a direct result of the flange, the neck on the radiator. It was 10 years old. It was brittle. Hose came off when I opened the hood. So just a cautionary tale to be careful out there so you don't wind up in the burn unit for a week.
Sean, thank you. We're glad Hopefully everything came out good, came out well for you. But that is
excellent point.
Excellent point. You never, ever want to. Well, and he didn't even open it. It sounds like you don't want to open a hot radiator, and for that matter, even if it's open, you don't want to put cold water in it because it might just vomit right back out on you. It's just gonna, boom.
It's boiling hot. That's an excellent point.
I mean, there's a lot of, even the batteries, it doesn't happen much, but you just go hit the key, you're under the hood, boom, the battery will blow up sometimes. It doesn't happen. I've had it maybe half a dozen times in 20 years, but you just can't stress how important it is to be careful under the hood, especially when it's hot.
Let's go with Mike from Mesa on a 98 BMW. Go ahead, Mike. You're on Bumper to Bumper Radio.
A six-cylinder Z3, and I'm wondering what's the best antifreeze coolant to put in that.
Joel?
I would go with the BMW factory coolant. That's all I would put in that car. It was designed for it, and that's what I would use.
Okay.
We had this conversation at breakfast this morning, and Joel, just like me, how many different kinds of antifreeze do you have in your shop?
You asked me, Matt. We must have 15 different kinds. We got BMW, Volkswagen, Toyota, Honda. They're all vehicle specific nowadays, and we like to stick with what the car came with.
Yeah. Now you can get, I think Xerox or somebody makes it all vehicles European. If you're in a jam, it's okay.
It'll get you home.
It'll get you home. 98 BMW. I would still stick with the coolant. Now it doesn't have to come from BMW. I know in our shop we have Total.
Yeah, there's aftermarkets that are equivalent with the same corrosive preventatives in them and same temperature capabilities.
Sure. Right.
Thanks for the call, Mike. Let's go with Peter in Mesa on a 2001 Nissan Frontier. Go ahead, Peter. You're on Bumper to Bumper Radio.
Hi, guys. Hey, so I've got a 2001 Nissan Frontier pickup truck, and the blinker, the flasher makes, when you're driving down the road, it makes a sound like click, 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 like it's trying to cause the blinkers to flash. They're not actually flashing, but when you turn the blinkers on, they blink normally, but you turn it off and it goes click, click, click. And I was told that it was probably the flasher relay. So I went down to the Nissan dealership and replaced that, and it seemed to fix it for about a couple of weeks, and then that noise just came back again, click, click, click.
I don't know, but I'd be thinking maybe the hazard switch itself would be a possibility there. That would be the first thing I'd have been thinking, would be the hazard switch or the flasher unit, but I'd probably be leaning towards the hazard switch on that one. Yeah. Do any of the lights light up in the instrument cluster when it happens?
No, when it's happening, the lights are not going on, and if I put either the blinker on or the flashers on, it works or functions properly, but when you don't, it doesn't.
And are you sure that this click noise, is it just a noise that's similar to the sound of a turn signal clicking, and maybe it's something else? Or are you pretty sure it is turn signal related?
I'm sure it's turn signal related.
Okay. I would agree with Joel. I'd probably be looking at the hazard switch.
Or the turn signal switch.
Turn signal switch. Yeah, there's some testing. We need to get the road map. You need to get a wiring diagram, look at it, understand how the relay works, what could be causing that relay. Sometimes that can be simple, and sometimes it can be complicated. So, probably out of guesses. I mean, I don't know what a hazard switch costs, and if you're, if you want to guess with that, I imagine it's probably a $75 or $80 guess. But pretty soon, guessing gets expensive.
Thanks so much for the call, Peter. Let's go with looks like Dan in Scottsdale on a 2006 Toyota Tundra. Go ahead, Dan. You're on Bumper to Bumper Radio.
Hi, guys. Thanks. Listen, I've got about 120,000 miles on my truck. Got a sealed transmission. Never had it serviced. Never had a problem with it. And I was just wondering, do I need to get it serviced? And if so, how much does it cost? What are the procedures to get it done?
Such a common myth and such a common question.
That's a great question. And Matt actually called me the other day. He said, I want to service a transmission on my Tundra because I just want to make sure I'm right on this. What would you do, Dave? And it's definitely not a sealed transmission. People think they're sealed. They take the dipsticks away from these things. So that's the assumption or the rumor. And you're going to get that. You're going to get that rumor reinforced by a lot of the shops that don't like to service transmissions.
Or that don't know how.
Or don't know how to service transmissions. So
right.
Absolutely the fluid wears out. It's going to lose its oiliness and all that additive package when they put in the fluid when it was manufactured has worn out of the fluid. So definitely should be serviced. How you go about servicing it, I would recommend doing a pan off or pan removal service where they actually change the filter. And Matt and I were having this discussion this last week because it is a screen filter, but I'm still going to recommend you replace it. And when it's serviced, I always like to break open the old filter to see if there's any debris or any evidence the transmission has a bigger problem.
Especially at 120,000 miles, it's a peek into the future.
Right.
And a lot of people, this is a common question, but if your transmission isn't having a problem, changing the fluid is not going to give it a problem.
No, it's not. So, and then if we check out the filter, everything looks great, the transmission's working great, then I'm probably going to recommend a complete fluid exchange. So we go ahead and get all the fluid out of the system, and guys do that different ways.
Well, we serviced my 2010 Tundra this week. It's got 30,000 miles on it. I didn't even bother to look up what the transmission service interval was. I'm assuming it's probably 100,000. I don't tow with it or anything. But I went ahead and changed my transmission fluid. Now, I just drained it, refilled it, but I used Eneos, a synthetic transmission fluid, and I'm going to do that every 30,000.
Well, and then the other point here is that takes a Toyota WS, I think back in 2006. That's the fluid that we want to put back in that transmission. There may be a private labeled bottle for it, but it needs to be Toyota WS or World Standard. That's the terminology for it. So that's a great call.
All righty. We're going to give Rick. Rick is calling all the way from Tucson. So, Rick, 89 Chevy van, what can we help you with a cooling system problem?
Yes, good morning to you guys, and thanks for taking my call.
You're welcome.
Well, I have a 1989 Chevy C30 one-ton van, and the heater gauge in it goes from 100 to 260. Now, I'm wondering, sometimes that goes in the middle when I'm driving it. Is that normal for that to be in the middle, or a little below, or a little above, or is there something else going on?
All of the above. A little bit below, a little bit over, and right in the middle is all the right answer. And gauges are designed in most cars so that vertical or completely level horizontal is where the operating range is. I used to work for a racing team.
Yeah.
When all the gauges are in the car, you want to be able to take a quick glance and see that the needles are either straight up or they're level. So that temperature range is perfectly acceptable, and being on the gauge in that range is perfectly fine.
Well, and then real quickly, where are these cars supposed to run? I mean, back in the day, 210 was a good.
Well, even 190. Yeah, you used to have a 180 thermostat or a 195, but
started running them hotter than
late 80s, early 90s. The 6-cylinder Jeeps, they were coming at 210, 214 degrees before the fans were coming on.
You want to be at about 210 nowadays in most cars, and vans in general always seem to run a little hotter.
Well, the fact or fiction for today, coolant change intervals, and I've heard people say this, and I cringe when I hear them say it because it's not true anymore.
Wrong answer.
But coolant change intervals is determined by the color of the coolant. I know we got green coolant and we got red coolant, and therefore red lasts 100,000 miles and green should be changed every 30. What do you think, Matt? Fact or fiction?
Misinformed. That is information from the 90s. So, what, Joel? We have blue. We've got blue in Hondas. We've got blue in BMWs.
We've got pink and green and orange and yellow in Fords.
But are the blue in the BMW and the blue in the Honda the same coolant?
They're not the same, and the color is not important. The actual features, the coolant will be clear. The color's usually put in there by the manufacturer just to distinguish.
It's just food coloring to make you feel good about the coolant that's in there.
Or to justify the price, because some of that stuff is absolutely ridiculous.
Or remind you not to drink it or feed it to your cat.
So, fiction. Speaking of that, too, I've noticed now the coolant, I see they have bitter additives in there now so that the coolant is not attractive for animals to drink or anything like that.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
so
I just started noticing that.
Robert on an 05 Yukon. Go ahead, Robert. You're on Bumper to Bumper Radio.
Hey, guys. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. I have a 2005 Yukon, and I have an actuator door problem for the air conditioning. It's a split system on the air on the front.
Mm-hmm.
And back in 10, meaning August of 2010, they replaced via a code called the B0408. It was an open actuator door, and they did a bunch of work. The dealership did. It was under warranty. And I guess there's about 4 or 5 little solenoids or actuator doors down there.
Yep, all kinds of them.
Yeah. And what happens, and I'm starting to wonder if it's an ignition problem or a computer problem, because if I reset the car, meaning turn it off, turn it back on, everything's peachy. But
but wait a minute, what's the problem that you're having?
I'm sorry. It's blowing. Good point. It's blowing hot air on the driver's side. It just decides that it's going to blow hot instead of cold.
So, and it's actually hot heated air, not ambient temperature air?
Correct.
Okay. So that's going to be a blend door issue.
Right.
And it's just not uncommon for those to go out. They're just motors, and they're working back and forth.
Is the passenger side cold?
Yes. And that's my confusion. The passenger side never has the issue, just the driver. And when I turn it off, meaning actually kill the car, turn it back on, restart the car, it'll go back, it'll reset itself, and it's fine. And then I can just be driving along thinking, hey, this has been working great for 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden it'll happen 5 times that day.
Yeah, it's going to be, and the reason it's doing it on the driver's side, not the passenger side, it very well could start happening on the passenger side. There's a motor for the passenger side because it's got a split system. So
his and hers.
Yeah, so it's probably got another bad motor if it's displaying the same symptoms.
Sounds like a bad blend door actuator, just like Matt said, and your car has 2 of them because you have his and her air conditioning. On and off, different voltage signals hit the motor. It doesn't take much to actuate it. Sometimes it's like giving it a little kick.
Yeah, and we have that problem sometimes after changing a battery. They don't work right, and it's not necessarily resetting. It's finding its home. It needs to know where the 0 point is or where the starting point is.
There's kind of a relearn process for that. If you go in with a scanner, you can have it find the parameters.
But it sounds like you've got a duplication of the same problem.
Thanks so much for the call, Robert. Let's go with Bob in Mesa on a 2001 Chevrolet S10. Go ahead, Bob. You're on Bumper to Bumper Radio.
Hi, thanks. I appreciate you guys' service there. The air is blowing hot, and I've taken it several places. I'm a senior citizen. I've taken it several places, and I've had estimates anywhere from $300 to $1,700. I don't mind paying to get it fixed, but, how do you know who to take it to?
Well, I can tell you one answer. The one place you know to take it to is bumpertobumperradio.com. You're in Mesa. There is Good Works Auto Repair in Mesa. There's Lee Weatherby at Accurate Automotive.
Mesa Auto Works.
Mesa Auto Works.
A little bit further.
Desert Car Care in Gilbert. But Dave and I, we've had this debate before, not just on air conditioning, but on everything. What I would be asking the guy that told you $300 is, why is it so cheap? And what are you not doing that the guy that's doing for $1,700 is doing? And then I would ask the guy that's $1,700, why is this other guy $300? And see what the answers are. Now, we don't know what's wrong with the system, but Joel, if someone tells you need an air conditioning overhaul because your compressor launched or it grenaded, what's the number off the top of your head?
I'd be thinking $1,500, $1,700 if the whole system is gone, but you got to compare apples to apples.
Yeah, we get it all the time. Oh, you want that much to do my air conditioner? They'll do it for $500. Well, they're using remanufactured parts maybe instead of new, or they're not replacing the condenser when you should, or there's so many different things.
There's another point here that I think we should address when we had this conversation this morning. 10 different mechanics, 5 different answers. Because there's a lot of subjectivity in what we do. You have some mechanic looks at the car, he wants the absolute best possible job for his customer, doesn't want him ever have an issue with the air conditioning again. The next mechanic, they both have good intention. He wants to save the customer money. So he's going to get by with having you spend as little as possible to fix it. But in the long run, is that the good fix?
Sometimes with air conditioning, your compressor could have a leak. The rest of the system's good. You might just need a compressor that time.
Yeah.
Let's say it's a Honda and the compressor deployed inside and there's metal splued through the system. You're going to need a whole system. So everyone's individual. You just need to compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges.
Well, and Jim Atkinson was on last week, and Jim does a lot of air conditioning testing for different companies. That's their background over there. And Jim Sapa was actually started off as a test center. But he was telling me the other day doing aftermarket testing of condensers for a manufacturer. And they put all this instrumentation on the car, and they'll go rent Chevy Cobalt or Hyundais or whatever kind of car that they want to test. They'll run all this test with the factory, and then they'll go put an aftermarket condenser in. In some of these things, the test results are absolutely horrible.
Huge difference. You make it cheaper, there's less heat transfer, it's not working as well. Well, we actually did have someone that called me, and they thought it was going to be $1,200 for the air conditioning unit. And it turned out they needed a condenser because and that's one thing that a lot of people skip out on. They think they can flush it out and make it work. But especially Hondas are super, super sensitive.
Those CRVs and Civics, when they grenade big.
Yeah,
big.
If you're going to go into that air conditioning unit, you need to go for the whole enchilada. no piecemealing it back together.
Yeah, yeah. So, Bob, but my suggestion is ask questions. Again, ask them, why is it less expensive and why are you more? And try and educate yourself. Try and get some information. And that's the power that you're going to have to make a good decision.